Nornavio War Room. Clara sat at the table's head, her eyes focused on the screen replaying Wyatt's footage for everyone present to see. With the Eternal Garden's capture and subjugation largely completed, she'd recalled Milcades and Cynthia shortly after Wyatt's departure. Aside from her two trusted friends, Redford Kalen was also present, but no one else. Efficient, simple, clean, Milcades commented as they laid witness to Wyatt patiently waiting like a predator, only to swiftly execute the leading Marine with a shot to the head. Then, he moved out of cover to deal with the rest of the latest group of traitors. The encounter lasted for only 10 seconds, but when it was over, Wyatt moved forth, leaving behind 3 dying Marines. "Brutally so," Redford commented, arms crossed. "He hasn't hesitated a single time. Aim, shoot, kill, repeat. Clemency is only dispensed once he achieves total dominance and if any survivors are left." "He uses the environment to his advantage," Cynthia added. "Ah, Cinter's bounty has been spread," she said as Wyatt heard Felicity's offer. The poison carried by the utterance of her surname was palpable through the screen as Wyatt spoke it. "I'm surprised he didn't forget his promise to avoid killing Caiston and Cintor. He broke Felicity's nose and her right arm. Casimir got his right leg and arm torn apart," Redford pointed out, though his empathy was absent. Milcades let out a chuckle in response. "He didn't kill them, old man." "That's not the point," Redford countered, but stopped when they all saw Wyatt's fake surrender, a trap formulated and executed within moments. The group of commoners were dealt with swiftly and uncaringly. Even when one tried to issue a surrender, Wyatt simply killed him before it could happen. The man had been a commoner, so his death was, sadly, of little to no interest. But Wyatt had already proven that if you stood against him as an enemy, there was no distinction in his eyes, no mercy, no doubts, no honor. That was his impression when he saw the recording for the first time. As if Wyatt's uncanny talent to twist people's view of him was omnipresent, his immediate action proved that he wasn't irrational, nor some bloodthirsty, ravenous, murdering monster. The next batch of commoners swayed by Felicity's bounty was stopped abruptly by witnessing what had become to the previous group. Wisely, they accepted Wyatt's offer of surrender. Unseen by Wyatt's feed but correlated with the recordings from the gallant venture, the commoners were quick to spread the word as much as they could to anyone who would listen, inadvertently saving several dozen more from Wyatt's wrath. "I would have carved through them," Cynthia declared uncaringly. "Precious seconds wasted on mercy against traitors, but I can't deny that it fits him to be so compassionate even when he doesn't need to be," said the blue-eyed woman as a tiny smirk adorned her lips. "He's nowhere near comparable to you, me, or any Royal Marine. He's but a single man, exemplary as he is," Milcades countered, and as Wyatt proceeded to tear his way through another group, he turned to Clara. "Hey, Clara, is there a way to convince you to hand him over to me? I promise I'll make the deadliest infiltrator the Principality has ever seen. Just look at the way he handles himself and utilizes his soul snatchers." "Even if you were to beg me on your knees, Milcades, I'm never letting Wyatt leave my grasp," Clara replied in a playful tone, while her eyes were still etched on the screen. Her heart raced as Wyatt came across the group of Marines and several bullets and laser fire drained his already weakened shields further. As the battle progressed, she wondered what went through his mind to create such insane, risky, and unforeseen tactics. The turret exploded, and he dove headfirst into danger, seeing something that only he could see and that the video recording couldn't transmit. "Good movements. Look how he maintains a balanced pivot," Milcades asked, pointing at the screen. Cynthia nodded. "He learned well to maintain and work with his momentum. He's adapted and embraced his training nicely," she commented, as he, instead of fearing being cut, displayed unmatched and controlled bravery to close the distance with his foe, only to remove him as a threat permanently a second later. His spatial control has improved vastly. His dominance over his complete field of vision is absurd in the best way possible. See how he reacts to any danger present, much the same as he did in Balakura? I'm confident to say he's always on the lookout for danger and ready to answer it," Milcades added. "You can thank the Drazen for that," Cynthia spat with venom coating her words. "Blessings in disguise or a curse?" Milcades asked, his jovial tone faltering slightly. "Both," Cynthia concluded as Wyatt finished off the last Marine. Ah, the commoners cowering, Milcades commented as Wyatt came across the large group cowering as he appeared. How about them? Do you take me for an unfeeling animal, Cades? Cynthia asked with a raised eyebrow. Blood-rend, Milcades replied with a smirk. They were unarmed and out of my way. Unlike Wyatt, I would have simply ignored them and continued, the blue-haired woman countered. It is regrettable that we didn't have the manpower to stop Javier Wunder and his forces from heading to the planet, Redford commented. He'll be dealt with eventually, Clara remarked. Moments later, Wyatt resumed his hunt only to come across a wounded noble. Her eyes narrowed slightly, focusing on what was about to transpire. Wyatt stopped in doubt as he watched the scene carry on, but soon he decided to step out and wordlessly help the injured man. He refused to know his name. What drove him to aid him? Redford asked, crossing his arms as he watched the scene for a second time. The first viewing of the record transpired in silence, simply taking in every action for what it was worth. After processing it, they could now comment on the second viewing. Everything from his arrival, quick executions, and ruthless advance was on full display. Worry and a sense of pride stirred in his heart as he watched Wyatt's onslaught. Before anyone could reply to his question, he continued, not glory or credit. Where others would take advantage to gain something, anything, he helped, expecting nothing in return because why? That man's servants showed devotion and loyalty to him? The marks of a rare breed of noble, a master who cares, Clara continued. His name is Declan Oakmoon, fifth son of Howlin Oakmoon, head of House Oakmoon, a relatively insignificant minor house under House Tygan. Did he survive his wounds? Cynthia asked. Thanks to Wyatt's prompt aid, he did. He's stuck on the gallant venture for now, Milcades replied. Cynthia hummed. To validate his survival, I'll avoid hurting Wyatt too much as punishment for wasting his supply of biofoam. Are you going soft on him? Milcades joked. Would you like to take his place instead? The red-armored woman countered. I rather watch from the sidelines as I appreciate my spine's ability to keep me upright, replied the white-haired man moments before Wyatt sprung the trap set by desperate traitors. Seeing this again, despite the ambush, he doesn't break his stride. He doesn't show more than a passing moment of surprise before he's counterattacking them. It's almost as if he doesn't know what fear is, or doesn't put any value in his life, but we all know that's not the case. Despite that, though, I would hate to face such an enemy in open combat, Redford commented as Wyatt proceeded to tear through the ambushers. Whatever mercy had been offered before, there was none to be had at that moment. There it is, Cynthia exclaimed, smiling as the surviving auxilia moved into melee. Wyatt had absolutely no talent whatsoever when it came to wielding a sword, axe, or even something as simple as a spear or staff. But despite his shortcomings, he was surprisingly adept in close-quarters combat, but only when he applied it in the two fields he dominated, surprise and evasion. She watched with rapt attention as the pilot used the lessons she had thoroughly pummeled into him so far to significant effect. Moving with ease, he countered his opponent's advantages only to exploit them in his favor with deadly efficiency. 1, 2, 3 fell to him quickly and used the woman as a shield, a cowardly tactic in every regard, but he used it to dispatch another foe before tossing the now useless living shield aside, inadvertently sparing her life. What happened next made her lean forth, every frame passing at a glacial pace as she examined every single movement made by the heterochromatic-eyed man. The breathing was rasped but filled with emotion, anger and disgust in equal measure, all directed at the Marine captain trying to end the threat Wyatt posed and claim glory in the process. Wyatt ignored the taunt, focusing on what truly mattered. She had to admit that the Marine's form was proficient and polished to a sharpened edge. The noble wouldn't hold against a Royal Marine in terms of skill, but it was impressive enough for her to know that prior to her training, Wyatt would have been sliced in the opening moves with ease. Then, it happened. Throwing any conventional move, feint, or riposte away, discarded as useless, Wyatt surprised the Marine by throwing himself to the ground. The Marine fell, defeated, and cried in anguish before Wyatt delivered a personal execution as his words revealed. She knew many would see that as a display of retribution for a man disgusted by the actions of another, judging them as honorless. But she could see that Wyatt was, above all else, angry that the Marine captain had essentially used his auxilia subordinates as peons just to claim the glory himself. It was the way many used auxilia and other commoner forces to their benefit. Unconventional, Redford muttered, his lips curled into a knowing smirk. Unpredictable? Milcades added, as Wyatt reached the last line of defense and proceeded to trade words with Captain Ciro Ortega. Paradoxical, Clara added a moment later, causing Redford to hum deeply in exasperation. He could have waited. Vivian, Jericho, and Vestal arrived at this precise moment, Milcades confirmed. They would be there in less than 3 minutes had he just waited, but there was no way for them to communicate their arrival. How is he able to lie with such ease? To make everything he says appear as truthful as saying that fire is hot? I can't detect a single hint of him lying. That, my dear Milcades, is something that puzzles me greatly, Clara replied. Captain Ciro Ortega is a man of honor, duty, and loyalty, even if the latter was misplaced during this conflict. He knew he and his men would be dead soon, yet he made the best possible decision available to him. A man who cares for the lives of his inferiors is a rare find, said the veteran commander. With confirmation that Casimir and Felicity would live, he decided to preserve both his honor and the lives of his men. A dangerous gamble if Wyatt had lost. He handicapped himself further by playing into Wyatt's declaration. I'm certain he fully expected to die in this duel, Cynthia pointed out. I'm more surprised Wyatt didn't shoot him as soon as he came out of cover, Milcades said with a chuckle. Despite the odd angle provided by Wyatt's helmet being on his hip, the duel between Ciro and Wyatt passed without any comment being made until Wyatt knocked Ciro out, and the onlookers looked on nervously at the pilot. They're terrified. If I were in their position, I would be too, Redford added. Defeated and no longer posing a threat, Wyatt let them go as the terms of their duel indicated, even if he cleverly reinterpreted them to suit his goals. Yet another life spared with more to follow. Seeing these moments of compassion makes one wonder, doesn't it? Who would believe that the man who killed 145 crew members without remorse is capable of showing mercy? Cynthia proclaimed, as Wyatt finally entered the Gallant Venture's bridge. The few crew members present fled once the offer was given, leaving only Felicity and Casimir alone with Wyatt. Casimir, terrified of the man in front of him, tried to follow the rules of proper conduct and honor, only for Wyatt to cut him short with a single shot. What followed was a demonstration of utter ruthlessness and, to some, brutality. Wyatt maimed Casimir again as he tried to retreat, declaring his hatred and explaining the reason why he boarded the Gallant Venture. With Casimir Caiston reduced to a quivering, pathetic, whimpering shadow of a man, Felicity made herself known. Her last-ditch effort at exerting revenge failed miserably, paying with her own blood and a cry of pain as her right arm was broken. Wyatt turned to find the Royal Marines a moment later. When did they arrive? Asked Cynthia. They watched the entire thing soon after the bridge officers left, Milcades replied casually, smiling. They could have stopped him at any time, but we all shared the same mindset, you could say, after those worthless surrender terms were spat from their unworthy tongues. He said, the ship is ours. The Gallant Venture and the rest of the trader fleet was hampered and disabled in large part thanks to his tactics borrowed from past events, his setting ambushes, and his single-minded decision to board their flagship. Despite all of this, he doesn't claim glory for himself. Not even a hint of it, Redford commented, a proud smile spread across his lips. And those were his contributions against the traitors. What we achieved against the Drazen is another matter entirely. I fear to imagine what would have happened without him present. I shall speak with my brother dearest soon. But first, other issues must be settled, Clara remarked. Milcades, I want you to edit the footage and combine it with what was extracted from the Gallant Venture's records. Take away Wyatt's rude comments, but do not alter the violence and exalt his moments of mercy and honor. Once you're done, accidentally, release the footage across our network and make sure the traitor forces see it too. Retrieve the footage from the dead. Delete it. As my princess commands, Milcades replied in a serious tone. I must voice my protest, my princess. Such an action will put Wyatt in the spotlight. It is an unnecessary risk, said Redford. I agree, but I will not allow the narrative of his actions to be left unseen nor crafted by rumors and deceit. Any defiance will be eradicated from the captive traitors, and any voice of dissent from our own will be silenced. I will suffer not any idiocy hampering us in this regard, Clara replied, closing her eyes for a moment. I don't enjoy putting Wyatt at the center of the storm, but this is preferable for us all. He will gain much attention, for we cannot hope to cover his enormous contributions, even if he cares not for glory, recognition, or accolades. Is it not a better option to guide such opinions and views as much as we can control them? Redford hummed deeply, then let out a defeated sigh. It shall be done as my princess commands. Thank you, Redford, Clara said sincerely. Has Ciro Ortega arrived yet? He has. He's being escorted to the medical wing for further examination, Redford informed, then paused for a moment before continuing. On that note, Clara, Wyatt is to receive a full psychological screening once he wakes up. This isn't for debate. Clara nodded. I understand, and I will not oppose your decision, Uncle, Clara declared before turning to Cynthia. Cynthia, please, share your findings. Gladly, Cynthia replied before retrieving a data chit from her armor. Connecting it to the desk's panel, the screen shifted from Wyatt's recordings to showcase a multitude of graphs, still images, and other charts. That's a travel path, Redford said, recognizing one of the graphs. The cattle ship and an escort of 2 destroyers entered the Principality through House Galvante's territory. 3 further incursions came from Galvante and Guimor territories. By the Prince, their incursions' forces are more substantial than I feared. I also uncovered evidence that there is at least another cattle ship present somewhere. After their initial entry, they cut communications to better their incursion chances and slowly gather in larger groups whenever possible, Cynthia continued, her eyes flickering as several recordings and still images came to the forefront. These Drazan, in particular, made contact with a pirate syndicate named the Sons of Darkness, who, in turn, were largely supplied and housed by the rebels present here, in Hastrung. A deal was struck between the rebels, the pirates, and the Drazan, in exchange for the Drazan's aid to carve a path across weak systems all the way to Jintrax and the subjugation of Woodshaft. The rebels would offer refuge to the Drazan to launch as many raids onto Ferentis-controlled systems as they desired, with the promise of conquering a world for the Drazan to inhabit and establish a foothold, the blue-eyed woman explained. An alliance, Redford spat. How did it fall apart? Jintrax, Cynthia answered. Gustav von Rast promised an easy target and the start of what he called a great revolution, starting with the downfall of Woodshaft. He correctly assumed and planned that House Caiston would be too weak and depleted to stop a Drazan incursion. Their objective was to raid Woodshaft and create a passage cutting through Ferentis territory all the way to Jintrax, claiming all systems along the way. But the Drazan raiders were stopped and broken at Jintrax, Milcades added, crossing his arms. We were fortunate in more ways than one that my brother headed Wyatt's recommendation, it seems. I dare not imagine the slaughter born from their success, Clara said, relieved. Gusev on Rasta's plan was to claim Woodshaft and use it as a staging point to claim Jintrax and solidify his nascent territory and empire. According to the Drazan records, of course. I am more than inclined to believe this to be the case. Cynthia paused only for a video to play on the screen. Lies. Feed lied. Many ships present. Weak. Not a real threat, fighting each other. One hunted us. Hunted. Drazan hunted. Unacceptable, said a rather imposing Drazan. Lord Harrower, please, calm yourself. I didn't lie. The presence of those ships was an unexpected occurrence, nothing more. Our alliance remains strong, and our goals shall be fulfilled. A tall, muscular, tanned man with a thick mustache, yellow eyes, and black hair said as he wore a pressed military uniform of some sort, with many unknown medals and other decorations present on his chest. Can I be sure? Many Drazan lost for feed ambitions. The Drazan spat back with the use of its translator. Give me time to formulate another plan of assault. We knew it wouldn't be as simple to see our ambitions come to a conclusion. A hurdle, nothing more. I promise you, you will have what you desire, Lord Harrower Cartagolgo, Gusev said firmly. Very well. Drazan upholds alliance with Feed, Cartagolgo replied, unceremoniously cutting the connection. Shortly after that, the Lord Harrower ordered his fleet to move into position. They fired upon the Sons of Darkness and the rebels with impunity. We saw the results of the battle ourselves. With the system under their control, they proceeded to invade the world. They obliterated any and all military bases, weapon silos, and factories using orbital bombardment, but avoided damaging the planet and population centers as much as possible. They also set a series of jamming satellites, cutting the planet off from calling for aid, Cynthia revealed once the video ended. "Can we eliminate those satellites?" Redford asked. "We can. It won't be a hard task for our fighters," Cynthia answered. "The question is, should we? These motherless bastards allied themselves with the Drazan, driven by the ambition to create their own petty empire within the principality itself, guided by a delusional belief that they could stand against us in the long term and keep the Drazan as their vanguard dogs?" "I will decide that later," said the princess. "Did you find any information that could tell us why the Drazan have increased their incursions to such an extent?" "What I encountered does not reveal a culprit, but it confirms that a year prior to the coup, the collective received numerous transmissions from an unknown sender telling them of the coming conflict within the principality and, more or less, invited them to take advantage of the situation. No targets were given, no names were mentioned," Cynthia answered. "So it was an open invitation to come and harvest as much food as they could possibly carry and become a nuisance in the process," Milcades asked, unamused. "Can you confirm that it wasn't the work of the traitors?" "Whoever sent those transmissions wasn't part of the principality. The Arabians and the hierarchy haven't made moves against us either. I suspect that the transmissions sent to the Drazan were a carefully calculated move. Otherwise, a combined three-front assault from our immediate neighbors in the midst of this succession dispute would have sentenced the principality to its death or united it against their invasions," Clara said, eyes narrowing dangerously. "It is clear that whoever is hiding under my uncle's shadow doesn't want to destroy the principality, but also wishes to avoid uniting us under a singular purpose. For what purpose, I know not. It frustrates me not knowing the extent of such machinations. Should I be relieved to know that Cornelius didn't unleash the Drazan upon us and is only taking advantage of the situation, or concerned that he is merely being used as a pawn for a game we know nothing about?" Redford asked, disheartened. "Could such a man be considered a pawn? Duke Draymore is no fool. We know not what his goal is to begin with. Trying to guess his plans would be as useless as trying to hit a mark 10 kilometers away from inside a sensory deprivation chamber," Milcades said. "Cynthia, you said that the Drazan wanted a planet to establish a foothold, but they don't have the numbers to establish a colony, protect it simultaneously, and launch raids at the same time without their alliance," Redford said, changing the subject to something they could control. Cynthia brought up a map of the Eternal Garden to the forefront. Several areas were highlighted with a deep green color. "These are their nurseries. Each of them contains Drazan embryo equivalents. They call them zaplings. The Eternal Garden was made by the Collective. It is a colonization and pacification vessel. The nurseries are carrying over 10 million saplings, more than enough to establish a functional colony in a short amount of time," she sighed. "The Drazan's sense of superiority and their wounded pride prevented such a catastrophe from turning into a reality. They believed the pirates and Gusev's rebels had betrayed them somehow. Rather than wait for evidence or seek a diplomatic solution, they betrayed their allies and were ready to claim their world for their own. Given this conflict and House Ferentis's lack of initiative, laughable military experience, and lackluster competence in such matters, Hastrung could have become a Drazan stronghold in less than 10 years. Gusev Onrasta is an ambitious man, ambitious and far too deluded by his visions of grandeur. If he yet lives, I shall ensure that his life ends miserably and painfully," Clara declared as she stood up. "Cynthia, please give Redford the numbers of cattle. I will see them later and decide what to do with them. First, I will pay a visit to the wounded, allow the crew to see me and exchange pleasantries with Ciro Ortega and Maximilian once he wakes up." "What of Felicity Cintor and Casimir Caiston?" Redford asked, also standing up. "Casimir shall remain as he is, tended to as best as we can. Felicity Cintor will be the last one I visit. Has she received treatment yet?" Clara asked. Access to a Medicare pod was denied, and she's been treated rudimentarily, with only enough painkillers to diminish her pain but not block it completely, as per your orders, my princess. Milcades replied with a wry smile. Good, Clara said, satisfied. Milcades, you may rest if you desire. If not, or after you've rested, return to your duties and rotate your Royal Marines in and out until the Eternal Garden is under our undeniable control. Try to preserve a few hundred docile Drazan alive for Istanel to select once it is safe for him to board the vessel. My princess, Milcades said, bowing his head. Redford, you may return to your duties as you see fit until I call upon you again. Dismissed, Clara ordered, and the aged commander saluted. Shall we? As you command, my princess, Cynthia replied, taking her rightful place as her best friend's bodyguard.